Welcome to Talk It Up, a Christian parenting podcast where our goal is to discuss 21st century topics to help you raise your kids. Hey, welcome back to Talk It Up. We are super excited that you've joined us back again. My name is Matt Lake. I'm the Next Gen Director here at Mount Bethel Church, and I am very excited to have our next guest, Mr. Barrett Johnson, with me today. What we're trying to do here is really just have critical conversations for parents, just to make sure that we're guiding and leading parents the very best that we can. And the critical conversations, Barrett, is something that you are very familiar with.
Yeah, you mentioned critical conversations. My brain went, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's kind of the subtitle of the book we wrote on this subject.
I pulled it from your book, Barrett.
Good pull.
Absolutely. And something that I'm going to get to some of the background of you and what you have to offer for us today. But you wrote something that says, becoming the parents your kids desperately need.
Yeah.
And that's really what I'd like to get to today, because we have parents in our community and parents that listen to this podcast, and they desperately want to be the parents that their kids need. And I'd love to get to that. And you have so much to offer. I don't know if we can get to it all today, so we might need to do a round 2 in the future, but we're very excited to have you. Can I run through a couple things here just to give our listeners a little bit about you, and then you can fill in. I'm gonna see if I got it right.
I'm curious to see if the guy that you brought to your podcast here is credible.
Okay, got it. All right, let's do that. So you've been married to Jennifer for, it says 32 years.
It's 33 now.
33 now. Okay, fantastic. You've got 5 kids. Yep. Grandkids?
7 grandkids.
7 grandkids.
I know what
That's
you're thinking,
awesome.
Matt. You're too young and good looking, Barrett, to have 7 grandkids.
That's the first thing that I
get
thought.
That all the time.
Absolutely. It's the very first thing that I thought. Okay. You were in youth ministry for 15 years.
Yep.
Got it. You were 9 years as a family minister. Mm-hmm. All right. And you've written a few books, and those books are Young Man's Guide to Awesomeness. So that's such a cool title, Young Man's Guide to Awesomeness. I've gone through that book as well, and I've shared some stuff with my kids. We can get to that later. You also wrote Meet Me in the Middle, and that was a teen girls book.
Well, there's a lot of good books out there for mothers and daughters. This is a book for kind of daughters and their fathers.
Got it.
For the dad who says, I want to speak into my daughter's life, but since she became a teenager, it got kind of weird because she's just changed. This kind of helps you step into those spaces for ways that a dad wants to coach their daughter a little more. So
and that's such an important topic.
Indeed.
And I have that on the list, so we're going to get there. It's going to be so good. And then the last book that I saw was The Talks.
Yeah, and that was the first thing we ever wrote.
Okay.
And it was kind of a soup to nuts for a parent who wants to help their kids navigate this hypersexualized culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's still, but that book was 2014, if I remember it right.
That's right.
Still really relevant.
It is.
I've gone through it recently.
We updated it about 5 years ago.
Okay.
Probably could update it again. It was
all right.
Things in our culture keep changing.
Awesome. What have I missed about Barrett Johnson?
No, it's all good. We love pouring into families.
Yeah.
Our nonprofit is called Imperfect and Normal Families Only.
Yep.
Which in our summation is just about everybody. If you're a perfect family, our ministry has nothing for you.
Yeah.
But if you struggle like the rest of us do, and you're just not as perfect as everyone is on their Instagram stories, then we're the people that kind of come alongside you and hopefully equip folks to discover God's very best for them as they do family life and parent their kids.
Great. So the ministry you also have, infoforfamilies.com, is where people can connect.
Well, info
with
is an acronym. Imperfect Normal Families Only. I wrote that on a napkin once over lunch and went, hey, there's something here to this.
Imperfect Normal Families Only.
Info. There it is.
I'm in. That's
go.
Awesome. Great. Well, again, we appreciate it. This is going to be a great talk. And there's, I'm actually going to go, we're going to start more towards the back of the book.
Okay.
And I gave you a little bit of snap of what this was, but when I read this and I was going through it, I was like, I have to start there because I think it gives such a backdrop. And this was written in 2014. It might have been updated after that, but it gives such a backdrop. And this is why it gives such a, just a backdrop to why this is so critical of a conversation for parents to have with their kids. And this is what you wrote.
No one's ever quoted me back to me before, Matt. This is awesome.
All right, this is going to be good then.
Let me see if I still believe what I wrote 10 years ago.
I believe it to be true, and this is great. If I were Satan, this is what I would do. If I were Satan, I would task my best people with messing up human sexuality. A key part of this would be a deceptive plan to convince people that their sexuality was a simple biological drive, not a critical dimension of their spiritual lives.
Right.
That's the first thing that you said, if I were Satan, this is what I would do.
Tweet that. That's really good.
It's really good. I think this is, but it continues, and a lot of it might be a little bit better. And I'm not going to read all of them. The book is The Talks, and so if you want to get the book, I highly suggest it. You can get it info4families.com. Another one. If I were Satan, I would give special attention to destroying the father-daughter relationship. If I can shift a girl's unsatisfied longing for her father's heart over to the desire for her boyfriend and the attention he offers her, there's nothing I can't do to mess up her life. And you mentioned a second ago about writing the book Meet Me in the Middle, and it was this father-daughter relationship on how important that was. And here you're saying if you were Satan and you wanted to mess up a girl's life, you would erode and destroy that relationship. Still rings true today, doesn't it?
I agree,
Yeah. All right. I'm going to go through a couple more.
Okay, go for it.
Because I think this is so great. If I were Satan, I would lead church leaders to assume that their parents are teaching their kids about these issues. Likewise, I would lead parents to assume that the church is doing it. And that's true today. Yeah, absolutely. It's, well, are you talking about it? No, are you talking about it? And there's a bounce back and forth on who's actually getting it right and whose responsibility it actually is.
And I think in the absence of parents, churches, speaking about this, our kids are Googling information.
They really are.
And this is not topics or issues you want your kids to Google. And so,
or worse than Google, they're not actually searching it out. It's being dropped to them
via TikTok or
and
whatever.
they just keep scrolling through the next video, and they're learning about their sexuality. They're learning about a relationship inside of a pushed video.
It's like we're having a war. I think that chapter is called Spiritual Warfare.
Yes.
It's like we're having a war and only the enemy gets bullets.
Yeah.
And we have squirt guns, or we're not even showing up to battle.
Yeah,
and
you wrote about
the call in the book is for parents to step up and step into these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And this isn't something that you just came up with. Now you came up with some of the things that Satan would do, but you were very clear. Peter 3:8, be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour.
Does it say 1 Peter 3:8 in that book right there?
1 Peter 3:8.
I think it's actually 5:8. That's
Is
a
it?
typo in that book, which is horrific. You sent me a message about this today, and I looked at that and said, that's not right. It's 5:8.
Is
That's
it
terrible.
5:8?
So I need to go back and correct my books.
Okay.
This is awful that you didn't find a typo in this book. But
hey, that's all right.
But 5:8 does say that the enemy prowls around like a lion, and that's what's happening in these issues for sure.
Absolutely prowling around.
Yeah.
Okay. I've got two more because these are. I love this. I would convince moms that it's dad's job to guard the hearts and minds of their children. I would convince dads that it's the mom's job.
Somebody else's job.
Somebody else's job.
Yeah.
And inside of the family, in your experience, do you see this, hey, well, he's supposed to do it or she's supposed to do it?
Yeah. I think you see moms more sensitive to these issues.
Okay.
But moms being more timid on these issues, thinking, well, if you were the dad, you'd step up. And that all does is create this rift between even a husband and a wife of tension of you're dropping the ball. No, you're dropping the ball.
Yeah.
So again, we're waiting for someone else to step in these spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, one more. I would saturate, and this is crazy because you wrote this in 2014. I would saturate the world with sexual images, which we're at a saturation point because of social and the videos that have come in.
Sure.
I agree with that. Making sure that young people in general and boys in particular get exposed to them at an early age. If you were Satan, that's what you would do. Yeah. Do you have anything to add to any of that?
When we teach this topic live, I always start with this principle that says that the things that God made the most glorious and beautiful and wonderful that makes humanity stand up and praise God, God, you are to be praised, are the very things the enemy allocates resources to screw up in our lives.
Oh, wow.
And again, nothing fits that bill better than sexuality, this thing that should be the source of our greatest connection and love and pleasure and intimacy and celebration and all these wonderful things. In reality today are the source of many people's greatest shame, pain, frustration, brokenness.
Yes.
Because I think the enemy has stolen from our God, the creator God. I mean, Prince didn't invent sex. It was God's idea, right?
Yes.
Okay? And so God created this thing for humanity to enjoy and experience. And I think it's been subjugated or subverted or undermined or stolen by the enemy of our God. And so again, that's why the book, in essence, is just a call to parents. Moms and dads, we have to take back ground. We have to step back into this space and reclaim for our creative, wonderful God what he made for our good.
Yeah.
And it requires a lot of talks.
And it's a battle.
It is a ongoing battle.
Yeah.
None of it's easy. None of it's all awkward. It's all difficult. It's all a conversation you're going to get resistance from your kids.
Yeah.
But all those things should not stop us from stepping into these conversations.
Yeah. A couple of pages ahead of time, you created a conversation between Satan and a parent.
Yeah.
And it was Satan basically saying, hey, I'm going to do all these things. And the parent just kind of, well, I've got plenty of time for this. And Satan was basically saying, all right, come on, let's go. Yeah. And that's exactly what that is. It's a battle. And, as parents, and I see that, 17 and 13, I see that. I see the influences that are happening to my kids socially, social media, and just everything that just gets bombarded. And that's why I read this and I was thinking about my kids.
Yeah.
All of this that you wrote in If I Were Satan, This Is What I Would Do. This is true, and maybe more true than you thought it might be, especially with the sexual images just coming at such a rapid level.
I think the stakes are increasing year by year.
Yeah. Okay. So we've defined that.
Yeah.
What do we do about it? So you think about these things of messed up human sexuality, destroy father-daughter relationship, and this moms versus dad, or pointing the finger at somebody else. I mean, what solutions can we provide parents right now? And I know that you could probably name off a lot of those, but if we can just get a couple very key things to our parents on this battle with Satan, what would you say to that?
I think parents, first of all, need to get informed.
Yeah.
I think if you, as a mom and a dad that's 40, 45, 50 years old, raising a teenager today, and you think the issues that your kids are dealing with today are the same that you dealt with when you were a young person back in the 80s or whatever, 90s, you're sorely mistaken. The issues and the information and the volume of messages coming to our kids is just absolutely incomparable to what we dealt with growing up. Yeah. So moms and dads have got to get informed of what the issues are, what their kids are seeing, what the value system is of the culture that we're living in. So they're mindful of, oh, crud, that is a significant message that my kids are getting bombarded with all the time. I've got to step into this quicker because I need the right information. There was a Babylon Bee headline. Do you follow the Babylon Bee?
Yeah, I see many of those.
It's kind of a conservative Onion kind of
that's right.
Satire site. There was a headline about a year ago that said, parents are baffled that the 1 hour of church attendance they're giving their kids every week doesn't compare to the 30 hours of TikTok they're getting every week.
Yeah.
And so again, our kids are being bombarded with this information that's wrong, that's lies, that undermines biblical sexuality. And so if mom and dads don't get informed of what the issues are and feel an urgency to step into these conversations, then we'll be passive. We'll just stand by and watch it happen.
Yeah.
And so we've got to be informed. I think the second thing is then to get bold and get confident and say, I'm going to step into these difficult, awkward conversations. That's far more than just a birds and bees talk. I think when I was raising my kids or my parents were raising me, there was a sense of, have you had the talk with your kids yet? And every parent on the planet knows what the talk is, right? But they kind of see it as a one and done. Okay, I had the talk. My kid was 10 years old or whatever it is.
Check the box.
I'm done. Where again, there's got to be more than a one and done conversation. It's got to be stepping into all these issues, all these topics, all these different things, because our kids are navigating new stuff every single day.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot of conversations our kids have got to have from us that we initiate.
Yeah.
And to create an environment where your kids know, I can ask mom and dad anything.
Yeah.
And that may start with a talk.
I like the bold comment.
When we had the birds and bees talk, we said to our kids, you've got to, if you have questions about any of this, you can always come to me. I'll give you an honest answer.
Yeah.
I think so many kids feel like if I go to mom and dad, they're just going to freak out and it's not safe.
They don't understand.
Yep.
It's different. They're older. It didn't happen that way.
Exactly.
There's all that stuff that happens in
and they're going to ask their friends then about the questions they have or values or what makes sense of this.
Yeah.
I tell my kids, I've told my kids all these years, hey, don't ask your kids about issues of sexuality.
Yeah.
Your friends are all complete morons when it comes to this topic. Come talk to me. Yeah. I love you. I care about you. I'll always give you an honest answer.
Yeah.
And keeping that line open. But then be bold, as you said. We've got to be confident. We've got to know that God is with us and is for us and goes, leads us into these things. He's not going to abandon us. God, help me have this conversation.
Yeah.
And He'll meet us there.
Yeah. I absolutely believe in that. But I love this idea. And if you can picture this, I mean, parents, if you're listening, to have this boldness about you when you're having these conversations with your kids, because it's not a check the box, one and done. Hey, let's move on.
Yeah.
You know how babies are made.
Yep.
And it is far bigger than that. And you mentioned something that So human sexuality for our kids is a far different. My kids is much different than what I grew up with.
Yep.
There is a gray area in their lives, and I'm not saying that from I don't teach in a gray area, but they see it in a gray area in this evolving version of what human sexuality is in friend circles or in schools or in other, sporting activities. We could have a long conversation about just the transgender sports and how that's impacting, different sports when it comes up with that. But, the Satan's version that you talked about is about messing up human sexuality. Yeah. We're there. Yeah. And it's big and it's frontline news. It's not tucked in the back anymore. Yeah. And I know this is you're very passionate about making sure that we teach our kids the biblical version of human sexuality.
There's a weird line at the front of that book, one of the first lines of the book. It sounds kind of creepy out of context. But here's the line, here's the sentence. I want my kids to have great sex.
Yeah.
I want my kids to experience this gift that God gave them. Unfortunately, there's so many ways, because of the enemy's strategy, because of the world we live in, there's so many ways that our kids can mess it up.
Yeah.
And again, nothing's irredeemable. The grace of God is sufficient to correct all of our sins and all of our brokenness, all of our mistakes. Praise God for that.
Yeah.
But I would love to help my kids get to the altar where they're committing themselves to their marriage partner for life without a whole lot of emotional, physical baggage that they've collected through the years of wrong thinking about sex. So that requires moms and dads to say, I'm going to help you from a very young age to begin to navigate this world, make wise choices along the way. When you mess up, we'll come alongside you and we'll seek God's grace and we'll restore. But we want to help you to get towards that direction with as little baggage as possible.
Yeah, because one of the things that you talk a lot about is emotional damage that happens when sex becomes something that is outside of a marriage, and the emotional damage that teenagers can bring into a next relationship or a marriage, and the damage that can cause later in life.
Yeah, you and I, we're growing up. I'm a little older than you are, Matt, but let's talk about our generation a little bit here. When we were growing up, high school, sex education stuff, the messages from the media, from politics, education, there was two key reasons not to have premarital sex. Two main reasons. The two reasons come to mind?
Absolutely.
All right, what do you got?
Pregnancy, teen pregnancy,
ding,
and sexually transmitted diseases.
Ding. All right, 1 and 2. You nailed it.
That's it.
We've been told for generations and years, the reason not to have premarital sex is you're going to get pregnant or get somebody pregnant, or you're going to catch an STD. Very compelling reasons. Those are still valid, good reasons to guard our sexuality and protect what is precious that God designed for us. Great reasons. However, I know and you know and our kids know that for about $1.50, you can go to CVS and buy a solution for both those issues. Not a perfect solution, but a pretty good solution that solves those problems.
Yeah.
So if those are the number one and number two reasons, then what's stopping me? So we need a better reason to guard our sexuality, to save it for marriage according to God's design. And I think it's more, and the research in our book that we document this, is more the long-term effects that premarital sex has on our ability to be successful in a long-term marriage relationship down the road. That's, I think, a better reason. We write in the book a lot about oxytocin. Did you read that chapter? Oxytocin is this chemical compound in all of our bodies. I think God put it there, and it's what scientists call the bonding chemical. It's what connects me to another person because of physical contact. A nursing mother nursing a baby. Yeah. That activity connects, it floods that mom's body with oxytocin, connects her to that precious little baby. Mm-hmm. But the real place oxytocin gets going is in physical, sexual content.
Got it.
It's when we have contact with another person and we have experiences that are beautiful and wonderful and intimate that oxytocin connects us emotionally. Not just physically, but emotionally to that person. You do that enough times with enough people, many times oxytocin kind of lose its bonding power. Wow, and so there's several studies that we document in the talks there that show the biggest correlation or biggest predictor of divorce down the road is not how old you are, how much money you got, how good a communicator you are. The biggest correlation of divorce is how many previous sexual partners you had before you married. And so there's 3 or 4 studies in the book that we documented. Those couples that marry without a whole lot of sexual baggage, their first sexual experience is as under God's design on their wedding night with their partner after they've had a commitment and a vow and a covenant they've entered. Those couples, by and large, have very, very low divorce rates. Yeah. Couples that have a whole lot of previous sexual partners before their marriage partner have higher divorce rates. And so again, what's at stake is not so much you'll catch a disease, you'll get pregnant, two very important things that can be avoided, but what can't be avoided because of premarital sexual contact, when our kids are careless with their sexuality, is they're undermining their ability to connect long-term in a marriage, which is the biggest issue, I think.
You did have a lot of research that was pulled into the book, and I totally appreciate that. I pulled one, and because this was super interesting to me when you talk about premarital sex. You call it a ticking time bomb at one point in your book. And this is what it said. It was a 2011 study at the University of Iowa, if you remember this one. And it says this: women who had sex as teenagers had a 31% divorce rate within 5 years of marriage. So teen years, they had premarital sex as teens. But if they waited until adulthood, and this didn't define if they were married into adulthood, but if they waited until adulthood, that the divorce rate dropped in half. So it's 15% in the first 5 years of marriage. So you look at these women who have had sex as teenagers, it's a double divorce rate within 5 years of marriage than those who waited.
I just think you're not preparing yourself for a mature, healthy, selfless relationship when you are careless with your life and perhaps even careless sexually. And so that's where, again, another reason for moms and dads to say, kids, you need to wait, and here's the compelling reasons why to wait.
It's hard as parents to give kids. So here's the deal. Let's be honest. It's hard to tell a teenager, I need you to wait for something, and here's why. Because the typical teenager they don't see long term.
Their brain's not fully engaged.
No,
with the
they
consequences.
are. Hey, I got to go to school tomorrow, and I got to talk to that girl over there, and that's what I'm thinking about. I'm not thinking about, well, I got to save myself because I'm going to have an emotionally damaged life after this. And so they're not thinking about that. Your book does a phenomenal job of going through, and you talked about preparing and those kind of things, and you've got guidelines, you've got points, and it's absolutely wonderful. Not everything I can talk about today, but if you were to give one thing right now to parents on your kids aren't seeing long-term, how you can dial them into long-term in a conversation when it comes to premarital sex.
I can't think of a principle to drive, but I think here's what's got to drive those conversations. Is a heart relationship that you have with your kid. We can talk forever, and every guest you have here about parenting and how to be an effective parent, somewhere along the way is going to be the fundamental issue of you've got to have a heart relationship with your kids. There's got to be trust. There's got to be connection there where when you do speak, your kids do listen to you. I heard somebody say this once, I think it's brilliant, that the most critical factor the parent should nurture and foster with the relationship with kids is their kid believing that mom and dad are looking out for my best interest. Most of our kids believe that. They may not like the correction or the discipline or the punishment you give them, but in the back of our kids' brain somewhere, hopefully, is this thought, they're doing this for my good. I don't like it, but I deserve this. The minute you lose that dimension, the minute a kid starts thinking, mom and dad are out to make my life miserable, the minute a kid goes into that space is the minute they'll start blowing up their life and taking everybody else in the family down with them. And so that's a key to start with.
I absolutely agree with that. And I love how you said that. My wife says it this way. Be invested in the small things so they allow you to be invested in the big things. And she's always said that, like, hey, we got to pay attention to the small things in our kids' life, because then something bigger comes up, sexual conversations about, where they want to go to school, conversations about, my friends drinking, conversations about anything else that's going on in a teenager's life. They have that, and you said heart, you had this heart part of it, and, it's an investment thing, and that all comes with time spent with your kids, and they trust you. I think trust is a huge thing.
I just finished a new book. It's being published a year from now by Bethany House about discipling your kids. And there's illustration I give in there about how you know as a parent of a teenager if you have the heart of your kid.
All right.
Here's a great litmus test.
No, this is good.
Let's say your kid's going to do something stupid. They're considering on a Friday night, they're considering going out and drinking with their friends. Something both illegal and maybe immoral for them to do at that time. Something you've made clear as a parent, you're not to do that. The minute that kid goes to make that choice, one of two thoughts will go through their head. First possibility is this: if my parents find out about this, they'll kill me. That's one option. Second option, if my parents find out about this, it will kill them. Now, check out the nuanced difference there.
Yeah.
One is worried about a consequence, a punishment, a grounding. The other one's worried about the effect it's going to have on their relationship with their parent.
Yeah.
Obviously, as a parent of a teenager, you want your kids to think like that second kid. You want your kids to think in their life, when I do this stupid thing, maybe I shouldn't do this because I don't want it to affect my relationship with my parents, because I value that. And so again, back to your original question, for parents, what can they do to have influence and help their kids to see the long term? You can't change, your kid's brain and say, implant a long-term perspective of this as much as we wish we could. But what you can do is say, son, daughter, you may not feel this or know this right now, but I've lived a little bit, I've seen a little bit. Trust me on this. You don't want to go down this path because here's the consequences, or here's the benefit and the blessings of going down this path. And when you say that, they believe you.
That's great.
Yeah.
You have 5 kids.
5 kids.
And what's one thing that you did not do great in this? You talked about this new book that you've written. What's one thing that you did not do great? Let me rephrase the question.
Yeah.
What's one thing that you wish you would have done better?
Yeah, it's a great question.
In the investment and that kind of conversation with your kids.
That's a great question. Relationship building, or more just teaching them or guiding them?
Yeah, let's talk about the relationship building part. So the kids your kids would actually get to that part of, hey, I do not want to hurt my parents or damage the relationship with my parents.
How did you foster that and maintain that?
Yeah.
I think 2 things. Number one is the simple truths from the love languages books. You got to know your kids' love languages and speak them often. So if it's a time thing, spend time with them. If it's words. If it's physical touch, and just whatever it might be, learn your kids' love language and speak it well. And speak it often. The second thing is more related to stepping into their world. My kids are very different from me. Every kid is different, but every kid's different from me. There are things that my kids were interested in and got excited about that, looking back, I probably had a passive interest in those things.
Okay.
And if I could do it differently and go back and raise my kids again, when my son wants to talk about comic book heroes, I'd spend time talking about comic book heroes. When my daughter wants to talk about horses, I talk about horses more and get excited about that. Yeah. Things that don't interest me, but I know it interests them. And if I can get into their world, like you said, in the small things, that when I want to influence them in the big things, there'd be more leveraged truth there. So I think, again, getting into your kids' world a little bit, as opposed to expecting them always to come into our world. Yeah,
I appreciate that. I know I put you on the spot on that one. That wasn't on the sheet that I sent over, so I got to ask the question sometimes, but it's all good. Okay, we've covered a lot so far. We got a lot to go, and so let's just kind of keep moving on this. Let's talk dating.
Yeah,
and you've set some dating principles in the talks. A lot of the parents that I talk to are, when can you date? And I've got a 13, almost 14-year-old, and it's like, well, when does he date? When does he not date? How does he not date? What date do we set that he can date? And how does this actually work? And what do we do? And there's something that you wrote in the book that I wanted to get your take on, because it's a little different than what a lot of people do. And you wrote that don't set a firm age when your kids can date.
Yeah, I think every kid is different. Every circumstance is different. So I wouldn't say to your 10-year-olds, when you're 16, you can start dating. I think that's an arbitrary number, maybe not right for that kid. I think what's important, though, is to also define, and I'm not sure if we do this in the book, but let's talk about it now. There's a difference between dating and being in a relationship. Okay? So when my daughter was 14, 15 years old, freshman, sophomore in high school, the school was having a dance, and she wanted to go with a bunch of friends with dates to a dance. We allowed that. That was fine. In a group of people going together. But we made clear to her, and I made clear to the boy that was taking her. And that's another thing. You have conversations with whoever was going to date your kids. You stay well involved with that as a parent.
I agree.
But we made clear to our daughter and the boy taking her to a dance, this is going to be one date, not 2 dates. One date. There's not going to be a relationship.
One dance.
It's not going to be Facebook official. We're not
official.
One date is all we're going to do. And so that was a date, and that was all it was.
Okay.
We made clear difference between dating and being in a relationship. Being in a relationship, and I've got a boyfriend, and we're together, that was pushed off to much, much later. We really advocated for even 18 years oldish, kind of high school
Okay.
kind of completion era. That was not a hard and fast rule. We had a couple of relationships kind of sneak in,
Yeah.
kind of under the radar that we kind of were on top of, that we kind of guided a little bit.
Yeah.
But that was kind of our delineation. Dating and relationships are two different things.
Yeah, absolutely.
One principle that we thought that drove us early on through all those days for sure, though, was as a parent, we're going to be all up in your business when it comes to your dating relationships.
And your kids knew that.
From when they were in diapers.
Yeah.
Honestly. So parent, watch this right now, talking about birds and bees talk. When I have that, I've got a 7 or 8 year old. Start speaking to your 7 or 8 year old right now about, hey, by the way, when you start going on dates with a boy or a girl, oh, I'm not going to do that. Great. But when you start doing it eventually, because I assure you're going to be want a part of that down the road. It's going to be a part of your interest level. Mom and dad are going to be all up in your business. We're going to be on top of that, mindful of that, engage in the conversation, mindful of what you do and where you go. And that's just a part of the deal. And there's a great book we love by Dennis Rainey called Interviewing Your Daughter's Date.
Okay.
And it's just a real short, simple book for a dad or a mom to give you guidance on how to have a conversation with that boy that wants to take your daughter to a dance or a boy that takes an interest in your girl. And great principles there. Principles that we led our sons when they started pursuing a girl. Or we said, hey, here's the things you need to initiate with this girl's dad. That's just a part of responsible entering a relationship. And we made clear to our daughters those principles from a very young age.
Yeah.
If a 17-year-old boy was going to take my car out for 3 or 4 hours, I'd have some pretty firm conversations with that 17-year-old boy about expectations of using my car. How's he going to treat my car? What condition my car would come back to me?
Yeah.
All those different things. I assure you my daughters are far more valuable to me than my car.
Than your car.
So I would have a conversation as well with those boys about those things.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. It's much different than just showing up at the door with a shotgun like the old cartoons.
All those jokes are out there about dads. But what makes me sad, though, honestly, Matt, is dads pass those. Here's the application for dating my daughter. Ho, ho, ho. Well, how do you want to be buried? What kind of shotgun? Blah, blah, blah. That's all hilarious and funny. Dads pass those around. But I've seen very few dads actually step in and say to a young man taking his daughter out, here's what I expect of you when you date my daughter. Right. I'm responsible for her. I'm stewarding her, that responsibility, over to you for a few hours as you take her to the dance. Here's what I expect of you and how you treat my daughter. Most dads don't do that. Yeah.
And it goes back to one of the things you talked about in the beginning of being a bold parent is that you have to step into situations that might be a little uncomfortable. And if you might make some awkwardness for your daughter.
But if you make your daughter aware of that from 6, 8, 10, 12 years old, and it's not this out of the blue thing at 17, then it makes it a little bit easier.
Okay. Do you know of any stories from, how many daughters do you have?
3.
Okay. Do you know of any stories that your daughter preceded their date with, hey, I just need you to know that when you come to my house, my dad is going to make sure that, that we just sit down and we have a conversation about expectations. Do you know of any of those stories?
Most of the time with our daughters, there's the pro and the good and the bad, and both of them are good. The good is a daughter saying to a boy, hey, if you want to take me to the dance, my dad's got a rule. You got to call him and talk to him first.
Yeah.
Before the dance. Not when he shows up with flowers and a tie on. It's call him up 3 weeks beforehand and let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
And so our girls learned to do that, and it probably wasn't their absolute favorite thing to do.
Yeah.
But they roll with it, and they think my dad cares enough about me to care here. But there's the flip side of that is when my daughter is 18 years old, a freshman in college, sitting at a bagel shop studying and drinking a cup of coffee, and a boy starts hitting on her. And she doesn't want to be bothered by him because she's not interested, but he's intensive, where she could say, hey, if you want to talk to me some more, here's my dad's number. You need to call him first. Most boys that are the fluff and stuff dudes, they're not going to take their time to do that.
That's right.
And it was my daughter, she saw it as a way to rule out the riffraff. I can just kind of get the guys I'm interested in out of my way, because if they're not going to even take time to call my dad, then I'm not going to waste my time with them. And so it served as a powerful tool in my daughter's pockets.
That's actually really great. Yeah, that's actually really good. Yeah. But the biggest thing that I hear is that conversation that happened at the time of dating was preceded with years of, hey, here's the expectations.
This is the way it's going to be one day.
This is the way it's going to go. So it wasn't a
shock down the road.
Yeah, and that's why you can say, hey, we didn't set a firm date or an age for dating. It was individual based off of son or daughter, but there was an expectation leading up to that when you feel like you get to that point, then we're going to have an open, honest conversation, and here's how it's going to go.
Yep.
Okay.
Indeed.
Perfect.
It seems a continuum of how parents are involved. Over here, you've got this is awful. I put the Duggars over here. You know the Duggars.
I do know the Duggars.
This kind of courtship model of which is kind of just nonsense. We've seen a lot of negative about that.
Yeah.
And there was a movement in that direction about 20 years ago. A book called I Kiss Dating Goodbye, which advocated for this.
That's right.
Which again, it's over here in the extreme.
Okay.
It's not recommended at all. But over here you have this other extreme, which is parents are just checked out completely.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the middle here, there's this happy medium of, hey, we've raised you, we're gonna trust you, but we are gonna be involved in what you're doing and who you're seeing, and know that we love you, and that's part of our stewardship of you as our child.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things that happens inside of your book is this constant conversation. It's not one talk.
Certainly.
It is with an S.
The title of that book was very intentional.
Absolutely.
The Talks.
Yeah, you have to just keep on going with it. Yeah.
And one principle there we didn't start at the beginning of, but the Talks, all these different conversations, we have a guiding principle that should guide every parent in this area, is that you want your kids to hear about stuff from you before they hear about it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Whether it be birds and bees or porn or transgender, whatever the issue is, you want your kids to hear about stuff from you before they hear it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that requires parents to kind of step into those conversations a whole lot earlier.
Absolutely,
and take
earlier.
the initiative to be younger than we ever thought possible, and that scares some parents to death.
Yeah.
But still, we've got to step in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the great things is you've talked about some guidelines and stepping in, and I don't want to spend a ton of time on the guidelines because I'd really love people to grab your book because I think it's a fantastic read for any parent and having these conversations.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to kind of quickly go through some of these guidelines because a lot of people are like, where do I start? What do I do? How do I handle this? Yeah, I want to be bold. Let's go. Come on, Mom. We're going to go make this happen. Now what?
Yeah.
And you laid out what you called just some different guidelines to consider. It's not like a roadmap, but it could help you kind of get there.
And let me pause real quickly there.
Yeah.
Guidelines is a good word. I think too many times regarding these talks, these conversations, we teach a live seminar. Parents want to walk away with, give me the 7 things I need to do, a checklist to guarantee that my kids will remain sexually pure and honor God with this dimension of their lives. There's not one of those.
You can't give that to them.
It doesn't exist. If someone promises that, run the other way. Because we can give some guidelines, some principles, some truths, yes. But I think God designed every bit of parenting to be that way, where there's not a checklist. If God gave me a checklist, my wife puts it this way all the time. She's brilliant. If God gave me a checklist, I would work the checklist and never bother talking to God. And I think what God wants us to do is follow some principles in his word and that are wise, great. But ultimately what God wants us to do is to look to him for guidance and leadership and help and support. And he will lead us. God has a voice. He has a spirit. He wants to lead parents to be successful in these endeavors that we're burdened by. And when a parent says, I don't know what to do, I'm on my face before God going, God, I don't know what to do, help me. That is the most glorious and wonderful place to be.
Yeah.
It's exactly where God wants us as parents.
Yeah.
Saying, I don't know what to do, God, would you lead me? And this God that loves us, God that invented sex, that God wants to help us to have these conversations that are so difficult. He says, I will guide you, I will lead you, I will empower you, I'll walk this out with you. So again, guidelines are great.
Yeah.
Let's look at some guidelines, but recognize what's most important is us saying, God, lead me in how to do this.
Yeah, well, the first one you say is get prayed up.
Yeah. There you
And I think that if you combine that with this love languages thing that you talked about before and understanding your kids, I believe through prayer with your spouse, or maybe it's just you if you're a single parent, that's fine.
Yeah.
But getting connected to God, I believe through the power of the Holy Spirit that he will actually guide you into the best conversation with your son or daughter based on what's best for them.
Most
and
definitely.
so that's why, you said it far better than I can ever say it, but the first thing is get prayed up.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's a huge part of it. So a few more things that you talked to about. Dad talk to sons, mom talk to daughters.
It's not an exclusive rule, but
Yep.
by and large, I think it's great for the same gender parents to lead the way. And if there's a single mom out there who says, the father of my kids' children is disengaged, checked out, then mom, step into that. That's your role there.
Absolutely.
But in a perfect world, a same gender parent can kind of lead the way. And then the other parent can step in soon after.
Yeah.
I remember, a week later after my wife had a birds and bees talk with our first daughter, stepping up into saying, hey, I know what you and mom talked about. I'm all cool with it. I'm so glad you had that conversation. I'm here for you. Whatever you want to talk about with me, your dad, you can ask me anything. So I kind of stepped in soon after.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Yep.
I have 2 boys, and so that was very clear. And hey, you're having those conversations, and that was fine. There was, I remember having both of those when we had them, where we had them, and all right, we're going to go for a walk. And one of the things that, and I'm gonna like take a right turn here real quick, but one of the things that you talked about was creating some kind of event with your kids that is almost like a growing up kind of event that allows you to kind of build on some different things of, hey, when you get older, these are the kind of things that you have to pay attention to. And you created like a little getaway of some sort with your kids to be able to have that conversation.
Yeah, and I recommend that. We say make it kind of a coming of age event.
Yes.
And everyone goes, what does that mean? No, don't have like a pool party, invite the neighbors over. Not that kind of a event. Right. But we kind of made it a milestone for our kids when they turn about 10 years old.
Yeah.
And just for free, this kind of birds and bees talk when you take away your kids' innocence and have this initial conversation about where babies come from. I think in our generation, maybe my kids are a little older, maybe 10 years old was kind of the right age-ish.
Okay.
I think in this day and age, that may be too old now. I think we've got to get there earlier. And so if there's parents right now who've got an 11, 12-year-old and you haven't had this conversation yet, you probably need to get on that soon. But for us, it was 10 years old. And yeah, my sons, we took them away to Colorado and spent 4 or 5 days in the summertime in Colorado, and we whitewater rafted and rode mountain bikes, did all kinds of fun, manly man, outdoorsy stuff.
Yeah.
But along the way at dinner every night, we had an intense conversation about what God expects of you as a young man. And one of those things was, here's what every 10-year-old boy needs to know. And we kind of delved into it. So it was a milestone event for our kids.
That's
They remember
fantastic.
it.
I agree with the age thing. It's tough right now because parents don't want to take away the innocence of their kids at a young age. But the reality is that it's getting to them much quicker than our parents realize.
The volume and the amount of explicit porn on smartphones this day and age, for an elementary school kid who rides the public school bus to school every day, in my mind, that's potentially the scariest place on the planet. Because all it takes is one 5th grade boy with no morals and a smartphone and say, hey, to your daughter, hey, your son, hey, look at this. And suddenly everything's changed. And
everything's
so
changed.
The world will take away their innocence. Parents, you've got to step in that space and say, I'm going to control this and speak to them about, in love, about the truth they need to know. Yeah. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, awesome. I love it.
What else guidelines you got there that are worthwhile?
Yeah, here we go.
What else did that guy write?
Yeah, we'll see if it's any good. Practice before you preach. So that's actually going through the conversation with a spouse or a friend and say, hey, can I just run some things by you? And that's...
How does it sound?
Yeah, how does it sound? Yeah, because sometimes you might get hung up on something. So practice that. This was the coming of age event. That was number 4 that you talked about. I love that. I love this idea that it becomes something that is intentional versus an afterthought. Yeah. And so I think that coming of age event, if our parents can take away one thing, it's like, hey, be intentional about it. Don't just be like, oh no, they heard this, they saw this, we got to hurry up, because you have to get out in front of it. Yeah. Start talking. Yep. At some point you got to go. Yep. You just got to jump in and get after it.
And again, you're going to feel awkward. It's going to be uncomfortable. Every parent that's gone before you and had this conversation felt uncomfortable and awkward. It's going to be okay.
Correct.
It's going to be all right.
That's right.
Do it anyway.
My dad felt uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable in it, and I felt the exact same way. Yeah. Yep. Keep it age appropriate. Use resources.
You said, hey, you know what? Our parents didn't have those. We've got tons of resources.
That's right.
Now.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. Be positive about it. Mm-hmm. Ask for a response.
Yep. Well, the positive thing, your kids might go, they're just blown away by what the physical act of sexual intimacy. Yeah. My son, I'll throw him under a bus here, 10 years old. He started doing the math and he said, you got to do that to make a baby? Yes. So you and mom have done that 4 times? I was like, yeah, more or less, maybe round up
something
a little bit,
like that.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah.
But again, to say, no, I'm telling you, son, this seems strange and odd. Trust me on this. You're going to want to be a part of this one day. Yeah. It's a very good thing. And again, they're not going to believe you. But again, as they come into their own and get older, bodies start changing, hormones start kicking in, desires, they'll go, oh, this is what mom and dad were talking about. Yeah, I do want to be a part of this. Right. And that's when your message shifts to, how do we not control this, but how do we guide this into operating under God's design and say what God is stirring in you now for doing it the right way.
Absolutely.
That's when it shifts.
Yeah, and that was
for
the
rest
last.
of your life.
That was the last one, and it said put everything into the right context,
Yeah.
which is marriage.
Yeah.
And I'm going to read what you wrote in here because I thought it was great. I don't want to just like paraphrase it.
Sure.
God designed sexuality to be expressed exclusively between two people who are fully committed to one another. Anything less than that has the real potential to compromise relationships and cheapen true intimacy.
Yeah.
And then right down here at the bottom, this was actually really good. And then we can kind of turn the corner a little bit. We have an unwritten rule at our house that we want to gross out our kids at least once a week by our shows of physical affection.
Yeah.
And that was just your way with Jennifer
Yep.
to kind of show what true intimacy in a marriage look like.
And if it grosses your kids out, it's funny, your little kids, when you start making out in the kitchen, sometimes little kids will kind of get in between you, like I want in on this. Like, I want some love and affection too. Teenage kids will roll their eyes and get a room.
Yeah.
And we joke about that. Okay, we will later on.
Yeah.
If you come to our door at 9:30 and the door's locked, go away. You might hear something you don't want to hear that will put you in therapy later on. Just walk away. And again, that grosses our kids out, but I think it gives them a sense of security that mom and dad still are enjoying this gift of God that God has given them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. So the 10 guidelines in the book, as you said, these are just guidelines.
Yeah.
But then in the following chapters, you actually jump into maybe deeper conversations with both females and with boys. So girls and boys.
Yeah.
And with the girls, you talked about the conversation going towards this idea of modesty.
Yeah.
That ladies, it's not about you. And you went through a few different items on this version of hot.
Yeah.
So in quotes, hot. And it said that hot impacts their view of self.
This when you say hot, you mean, or I meant
Like attractive.
There's this value the world puts on kind of being hot, and that was a term from 10 years ago.
Oh,
maybe
absolutely.
Maybe that's not a term anymore. I don't know. But yeah, this idea of I want to be sexy. I want to be hot.
Yep.
So again, for a girl who kind of thinks that way or desires that value exclusively of this is the most important thing in the world to me, a la Kardashian or whatever.
Yeah.
The principle of hot implies what? Keep on reading there.
No, it was it impacts their view of self.
Yep.
Impacts how men see them.
Yep.
And impacts how they reflect God.
Yeah.
And so you went through talking about in the conversations with your daughters how that becomes also part of what you're teaching them.
Yeah.
So how would you teach a daughter? How would you help a parent teach a daughter about view of self, how they see themselves, and how they reflect God in that conversation?
Conversations about modesty in the church in the last 20 years have kind of skewed one direction, and I'm not uncomfortable with the direction it's skewed. It's skewed in the direction of your Christian brothers are prone to lust, and so it's your responsibility to dress in a way that doesn't cause them to stumble. That might be true in some ways. However, I think of a man is prone to lust. That's his problem and his fault, not a girl's fault.
Right.
Okay. So let's not make the girl the person that carries the weight of that. Let's teach our boys not to lust, or at least contain those feelings and have a God-honoring control of their eyes. So that message has kind of been skewed. What I would love to tell our parents and coach parents, they coach their daughters about how they dress and how they look, is that it's inevitable, because men are visual, that if a young man or an old man sees a woman who's dressed in a hot way, the intention is obviously to look sexy for sex appeal, for that sake only. The reality is a man is prone to remember that or be drawn to that or to focus on that. My argument is, my Christian daughters and Christian sisters, you are so much more than that.
Yeah.
You're a creation built in the image of God. Your feminine beauty is a glorious and wonderful thing that God gave you, yes. But you run the risk that if you dress in a way that is immodest or hot or whatever, you run the risk of that being the only thing that the opposite sex remembers or focuses in on you. And you are so much more than that.
Yeah.
And so you want to honor yourself and honor God by being a person who is a full image of God that is beautiful and feminine and has sex appeal. Nothing wrong with that. God put that in you. But that also has character and heart and knowledge and wisdom and strength and all those different things that a woman has, that we all have, but that you don't want to be remembered exclusively for this dimension of you, which is only one small dimension of you.
Yes.
So dress in a way that honors God and doesn't draw attention to that part of you that is one small dimension of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Absolutely makes sense. And it actually reminds me of a story that I was told recently from a mom and a 14-year-old daughter. And there was just a situation as they were out in public, and the daughter was not dressed inappropriately at all, but there was a situation that an older guy just kind of had eyes locked on daughter. And the mom handled it great. From what she told me, she said, hey, I need to tell you something. And she pointed, not like blatantly pointed it out to make somebody feel bad, but said, hey, I need you to look over there, and I need you to see how this person's looking at you. Yeah. And I need you to understand how you carry yourself in public. That's an unfortunate part of being a very pretty 14-year-old girl. Yeah. And so I think in the moment it was handled very, very well, but that's a reality when you think about these. It could really hurt their view of themselves if they just have that kind of lingering around. And
there's also the another factor you move into about our girls just being vulnerable and protecting themselves. When there's a sexual assault in our news, and some woman was given a drug at a bar, or was drunk and was taken away by someone and taken advantage of in some way, horrific, horrible situations. We should never ever say that was the girl's fault because she was dressed a certain way, or never the girl's fault. However, if you watch a Wild Kingdom documentary or Planet Earth, and you're seeing on the Serengeti a bunch of animals out there, and a lion looking for someone to go gobble up. That lion is not going to identify the fastest, strongest yak out there, okay, or wildebeest or whatever it is. He's going to find the one that's the easiest target, the sickest or oldest or smallest. That's an easy one to catch and pursue. I always told my daughters, if you go out with friends or you're in a public place, there are evil people out there. Yeah. There are men that want to take advantage of you. Don't make yourself an easy target.
Yeah. Great advice.
It's not your fault.
That's right.
If you're worried, if someone targeted you, but do all you can to guard and protect yourself. Be careful what you drink and what drugs. If someone guard your drink or whatever else, because there are evil people that want. So you be intentional about that. Yeah. But even the way you dress can make you a target if you're not careful. Yeah. And again, just be on guard of that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
That's a freebie there.
I think it's awesome. I appreciate it. All right, let's jump over to the boys.
Yeah, boys.
You talked about chivalry. Yeah. And training our sons to honor and protect women as part of that conversation. Yeah. Gave them a few just pointers of providing protection. Yeah. That's part of our role as boys, and as we grow into men, is providing protection to women, and that's a God-honoring protection you talked about. Giving honor was the other part of that, giving honor to women, demonstrating gentleness, because that's a part of it. You get into teenage years, and that's a hard thing to maybe understand a little bit, and modeling sacrifice. Those are the things that you mentioned, talking about chivalry with boys.
That the book we wrote for boys, The Young Man's Guide to Awesomeness, the subtitle is How to Guard Your Heart, Get the Girl, and Save the World, which is a pretty...
It's pretty awesome.
It's pretty hard thing to nail, but I think just guard your heart, sexual purity, get the girl, how to pursue a girl in the right way, and operate with those chivalrous kind of things that you just talked about. And then how to save the world, how to have a life of purpose and meaning that aligns with God's design. Those are not things that come naturally to boys in our culture, but parents have to call their boys to that. And so we taught our boys early on, chivalry is the part of you that has strength and is a man, and God wants to use that strength and that character in your manhood to guard and protect the vulnerable, particularly women that are more vulnerable physically than you are because you're stronger than they are. Use that strength for good, basically, leveraging that strength for good. And so we challenge our boys to do that at every chance we possibly can. We practice when they're young with their mother and their sisters, holding doors open and just being kind, helping carry things. And when it's time to load the car and carry suitcases out on vacation, no, boys, you go get the girls' suitcases and you take care of that. All those different things that are small when they're young. But as they get older, the stakes get higher, and the application of chivalry looks very different. And I think where it comes the most clear application is when you say guard and protect women. When you start dating, that girl you're dating and you're guarding and protecting her and being a steward of her father to be the protector of that girl for the couple hours you take her on a date, great. But one of the key things, one of the key people, one of the key window, or how do I say this? What you most have you focused on guarding and protecting this girl from is you. Because how you treat her and how you honor her and how you interact with her physically is one way. If you're not careful, you'll start being someone who is taking advantage of her, as opposed to sacrificing and loving and guarding her. And so many young men, I think, kick into self-centered mode when it comes to a dating relationship. And they see that relationship as just really, it's fun, she likes me, and she's an outlet for my sexual desires. And guys can move that direction very, very quickly if they're not careful. So we challenge our boys. Guard and protect. You guard and protect her from you first and foremost.
Were these conversations a lead up to having like a true the talk, the birds and the bees talk and how all of that stuff goes? Or was this post?
I think a lot of these things were ongoing together. It kind of runs concurrently. Unfortunately, it's not a sequential, start with this, then this, then this, then this, because every kid's different. But you're talking about, there's a whole chapter about abuse. You're talking to your youngest ones about how to guard your body. Don't let anybody touch you where they shouldn't be touching, and those kinds of things. You're talking to your kids ongoing about proper relationships, chivalry and modesty. The modesty conversation with a 15-year-old is a lot easier if you start that when she's 5 years old. We weren't big fans, and we've kind of evolved some, but by and large, we weren't big fans of bikinis when our kids were teenagers. Everybody's different on that. I don't want to be overzealous on this, but I wasn't thrilled. I wouldn't let my daughter go to the pool in her bra and panties. I wasn't thrilled about her wearing a bikini. So we kind of made it a rule of thumb that when she was 5 years old, she wouldn't have a bikini. Because if she has a bikini when she's 5 and 7 and 9, 11 and 13, and suddenly she gets curves and her body changes, you can't wear that anymore. That's kind of a tough sell.
It is a tough sell.
We kind of just said, these are kind of our rules. So it's kind of concurrent conversations that were ongoing with all this stuff.
Okay, great. You mentioned something earlier, and I'd like to jump back to it because I think that this is one conversation that our parents are also very hesitant to have. Pornography. Tell you a quick story, and because it's not a conversation, I'm totally okay to have this conversation. I was leading a group, 8th grade boys. This was 4 or 5 years ago. And one of the kids in the group, so parents, if you guys don't know this, pornography happens at a young age, and this was 8th grade, it's there.
I think the average age of first-time exposure to hardcore porn now is 11 years old.
Wow.
It's average.
So one of the kids in our group said, I watch porn. There, I said it. And so, there's a chuckle from the other kids, and there's, 8 or 10 of us in the group, and I said, okay, let's talk about it. And so it was dead silence in that moment, but it created an opportunity to actually have a conversation about pornography with a group of teenage boys.
Amazing.
So that's one way to do it. The other way is to kind of get out in front of it before 11 years old. How would you encourage our parents, help our parents start the conversation? Where do they start when it comes to pornography? Because it's there, and they've got to go quick.
Definitely.
Because they're going to see it.
It starts immediately after birds and bees talk, or even before, but definitely in the birds and bees talk. When I had conversation with my sons about here's where babies come from, here's what the principles of what happens with sexual intercourse. Immediately shifted to, and by the way, there is a whole big, ginormous, and profitable industry that shows people doing this in pictures and videos. It's out there. And it's not if you find it or see it, it's when you see it. It's going to happen. You need to have an opinion right now about when you do stumble upon it or encounter it, or your friends are looking at it. You need to have an opinion about how you're going to, what you're going to think about this. And so starting to foster that opinion early on. To that point, there's also some resources out there that we love called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. It's a children's book, picture book that you read with your kids.
Good Pictures, Bad Pictures.
There's even a Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior that's even younger.
All right.
Kind of older preschool age, that you walk through and give them an introduction of here's what is potentially out there that you might encounter on a screen, and here's why it's bad for you and what you do when you encounter it. Every parent is afraid to have that conversation with their kids because they're afraid if I tell my kids about pornography before they've encountered it, they're going to be curious about it and go exploring it, and then they'll be off down a rabbit hole. I get that fear. However, in the work that we do, we have a whole lot of conversations with parents who are in the middle of these issues with their kids because they call us because they know we'll talk about it. In 10, 15 years of doing this almost full time, I've had 2 occasions when a parent has called and said, hey, we told our kids about pornography, how to avoid it, and we found it later on they were looking at it, and they said, it's because I got curious because you told me about it. That's happened twice. I could name hundreds of families who would say, we didn't talk about it, we didn't equip our kids, we didn't prepare our kids, we didn't give our kids a value system about it, and they got caught up in it, addicted to it even at 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old.
And it's an addiction that stays with them.
It's not something that goes away. It is an addiction that they will fight all the days of their life.
That's right.
And so, yes, it can happen that you'll take away your kid's innocence and then they'll go exploring something. It's very rare. We've got to get beyond the fact that if I share some of my kids, it's going to make them do that thing. We've got to be confident. No, God owns sexuality. We have to frame this properly, help our kids navigate this, because again, the pornography thing is a chronic issue. Chap Clark of the Fuller Youth Institute writes about that, and he says that 60% of our teenage boys, 60% are addicted to porn. And that's not kids in the bad part of town. That's kids that go to church here and go to church where I go to church. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And so if we don't step in and address it, we're creating, again, another marital time bomb for our kids.
And if we go back to the beginning where we talked about, if I were Satan, this is what I would do.
Yeah.
You get into this situation of sexual images are so accessible just by phones. You know, that's just the nature of those.
Yep.
And then you get into the mom pointing at dad and dad pointing at mom, and then church saying, what are you guys? And church saying, well, you know, mom and dad, you're supposed to do it. Mom and dad saying, hey, church is supposed to do it. And you just get this round robin thing, but stuck in the addiction is a group of teenagers, you know, 6 out of 10 boys, and it's a very hard thing to break. So if you haven't started the conversation, start the conversation.
Well, and I can make a list of about 20 different things of why porn is bad. Okay? We can all agree it's not a good thing.
Correct.
The number one thing that troubles me is I did a lot of work in our former church role with newlyweds, engaged couples, and premarital counseling, and took probably 500 engaged couples through a premarital workshop we did. And so we get to know them and they join our church. Then we'd start discipling them, maybe a part of small groups of newlyweds. Love this part of ministry.
Yeah.
We were stunned at how many couples. That's really the reason we wrote the talks and have given ourselves to this ministry.
Yeah.
So many couples that are a year, 2 years into marriage, young, no kids, dual income, they should be swinging from the chandeliers with regards to sexuality.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Don't need to draw pictures. Are we okay? Swinging from the chandeliers.
Yeah.
We were shocked at how many couples were having problems in that area.
Wow.
Struggling. And it's twofold. Number one is because moms have told their daughters all their life, sex is bad, don't have sex. You'll get pregnant, you'll catch a disease, sex is bad. And then on their wedding day, finish the reception, take off for a honeymoon, mom whispers in their daughter's ear, it's okay now, have fun. And these young women can't turn the corner because they've been programmed. Parents, don't tell your kids sex is bad. Tell them sex rocks. It's wonderful, it's good. Do that, okay? And the other problem is boys addicted to porn, young men.
Yeah.
And it undermines the marriage. It's the porn thing.
Yeah.
Because a young man from 14 to 24, let's say, has got a decade of training learning that sex is easy. It just happens.
Yeah.
The girl is always interested. She requires absolutely nothing of me.
Yeah.
And then he marries a real live woman. The girl of his dreams. She's beautiful and wonderful. Everything he's ever dreamed of. And he thinks, finally got a healthy outlet for my sexual desires. I don't have to look at porn anymore. But what he does, he realizes this girl that he married, this is girl of his dreams, she requires something of him to make intimacy happen. He's got to love her.
That's right.
And connect with her emotionally and press into her heart and woo her. All the things that we know as married men. This guy goes, it's just so hard and difficult. It takes so much time and energy. It's so much easier to go back to point and click. We've raised a generation of lazy men. And so porn has been basically the fuel for that laziness.
Yeah.
So again, the stakes for these issues are incredibly, incredibly high.
They are.
For us to help our kids navigate this crazy hypersexualized culture with some measure of wisdom, because we want them to be successful for 40, 50, 60 years of marriage down the road. And it starts right now.
Yeah.
It starts when our kids are 10 and 12 and 14 and 18, coaching, guiding, having conversations, helping to see God's got a great, amazing design in this gift of sex he's given us, but we've got to use it wisely. We've got to step into his principles and experience his very, very best for us. Won't happen automatically. We've got to be intentional. And your kids don't know what they don't know. Moms and dads, we do know. and we've got to coach them.
Absolutely. And, we said it in the beginning, become the parents your kids desperately need you to be.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I'm a work in progress in that. Matt, I bet you would say that you're a work in progress as well.
Of course, yeah. I'm still in the throes of it right now with 17 and 13. I'm still trying.
But we've got to keep on saying, God, help me to be focused and intentional on these issues.
I agree. Yeah. Absolutely. Barrett, anything else that you want to leave our parents with? We've covered a whole bunch. And, I know we skimmed the surface.
We did.
I would say pick up the book that talks. Pick up the book, The Young Man's Guide to Awesomeness.
You've got a boy that's 13 and up, or a girl that's 13 and up. Those two resources for daughters and sons
are
a great way to kind of. And my wife puts it this way: it's great. Make the book the bad guy. Hey, daughter, meet me in the middle. Read chapter 1. Let's go get a milkshake and talk about it. Or son, hey, read this and let's go sit on the back porch and have a conversation.
Yeah,
the book will hopefully tee up some conversations that you need to have with your kids.
Yeah, I love it very much. Infoforfamilies.com is where they can connect with you. They can get the resources there. You've got a lot of different materials that they can get on a bunch of different topics, and I think it's a really great resource. I've scoured over that quite a bit here recently, just trying to get a little bit better idea.
We love serving imperfect and normal families because we are one, and so
imperfect and normal families only.
Only.
I remember. All right,
if you're perfect, you got it together. Don't go to our website. We've got nothing for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Barrett, man, I love you for this. This is so
My
great.
Joy. Been fun.
It's been a lot of fun. We appreciate you listening. I hope you tune in next time to Talk It Up. Have a great day.